reflection. So just first of all, framing the definition. So the only difference between the individual definition now is we talk about collective. So if we are as a team, we are collectively managing what's on our plate. So we're collectively managing our pain points, managing our pressures. So straight away, that goes to alignment around things like workload management, sharing support, those sorts of things. And we're doing that in a healthy way. So we're not doing it in a way that we're burning out. And we are adapting to change together, and we're proactive around future challenges together. So you can actually see that the change one alone, if I'm actually very, with this particular change and I'm all excited and I'm all energized, and then Paul is had enough, change fatigue, all those words we use at the moment, then straight away our adaptability together is quite different. So that growth mindset and all that stuff that they talk about these days. So it's very much around alignment and collective. So how the model, just a very, very brief history of the development of it. So you have the paper in your in your Dropbox materials that Sharon sent, the original paper with Carolyn Boyd, and Emily did a lot of work helping us with the team as well, with the team measure and model and writing up stuff for it. So, I was really curious around in very complex systems, a bit like child protection, Lyndall, how some teams manage to be relatively okay in the same problems and the same challenges. So Nick, you've worked with lots of social workers who are in, terrible systems, and, sometimes the teams are managing really quite well. So I wanted to look at what are those ingredients. So how we developed the measure was we took a whole heap of items. The first one we did was we took all the individual items for the raw individual, and we said, what if these were a team item? In our team, we rather than I. So we did that. Then we took all the items that reflected effective teamwork, so I developed an effective team survey a couple of years before that we'd done some validation. We took all of those items and added a few more. And then we looked at what is it that teams are doing differently that they didn't have to do previously. And that's all the stuff around persistence and being resourceful and so on. All those items, there was a big pool of them, they all went in the mix, and out of that we've got our 42 items. So what that means is that there is an overlap between the raw team as a construct and the raw individual, because we did look at how do we build on the individual as well. And one of the master students who worked with me, Dan Reese, did a little bit of a project, and I think it was about 40% of the raw team, as measured in this way, was accounted for by individual resilience. So we're not discounting individual resilience, we have to build on it. But what we're saying is, well, what's the other 60%? So does anyone want to ask a question? Because what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to really quickly go through this and then go through the report before we do a case study. So I'm just going to stop there. Has anyone got any question around the evolution of it or the development of it, or that sense of it being a different construct? And the literature is only really just emerging on what is this construct of team resilience. So there's, probably in the last 5 years, there's been a real interest. And it surprises me that we've focused so much on the individuals and not teams. And so team coaching is becoming a real big thing at the moment. I think positive psychology hijacked a bit because that's all about individuals. So I think that, and mental health, that's all about individuals. So I think those things hijacked a little bit of the focus on the teams, but I do think it's really where it's going now and where we need to focus. All right, now, so when we talked about the raw individual, you may or may not recall that it was about investing in as many things as we could. in our circumstances. So the idea was to try and get a balanced set of habits that we could deploy in different circumstances. The raw team wasn't set up that way. It was always set up because there's so much in it. Really, it's almost everything about a team except its structure and the actual talent of the people itself. It's got everything else in it. The idea right from the beginning was it's about actually strategically looking at what we need to be, what's going to give us most bang for the buck, if you like, in the challenges we have. So you'll see the process is about identifying the pain points for the team. So it's all about context. Then looking at how we're traveling on all of these areas and looking at what do we leverage as strengths and what do we work on. Because to work on everything is a lot of work. you know, so it's very strategic. The only thing that happened with COVID is all of a sudden everything was important. But I still like to focus on, and you'll see this today when we work on what, you know, how we use it. It's about, as you know, for Nick, you know, in the person you were working with, you were doing your individual, in his or her team, what are the things that team's struggling with, and what are the points they have to leverage and work on to have a better relationship with that pain point. And it's not about solving the problems in the same way that we can't solve our individual problems, you know, as you know, you were saying, Lyndall, about the personal stuff that comes in. We can't solve the system issues. We can't solve every problem in the team, but we want to have a better relationship with the system, and it's precious. So that's the sort of thing. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Sorry, just a question.
Yeah, I'm going to stop
early. When you look at the 7 components, is there any link to saying teams that not so much score better, that seem to be better at these 7 components are more effective or higher performing teams? Or could this actually be an indicator of team effectiveness as opposed to team resilience?
Yeah, it is, Kieran, because you can't be a resilient team if you're not effective. So I think of this model as team effectiveness plus the additional factors. And so if you look at the model, the piece which is the traditional team effectiveness, and I'll explain this in a minute, is the robust, because that's about clear goals, you know, your purpose, you know, all the core stuff. So the answer is, this is about effectiveness, but what it adds in, and as I said, the items that I threw in the original mix for the research were team effectiveness items, you know, that are well established in the literature. The difference is teams already, when we're developing this, we're having to do more with less. We're having to mitigate burnout. We're having to be more in touch with change in stakeholders' needs. We're having to deal with setbacks, and all COVID did was it made all those things worse and made the connected one even worse, because that sense of care and connection and belonging was also fractured. Yeah, so even more than ever, I suppose, this is team effectiveness in what we've traditionally called the VUCA environment. So originally it was designed for complex systems where all these things were happening. All COVID did was make that every system, really, every organization.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, yeah, so we've gone from just, you know, the environments that Nick and Lyndall might be working in to, you know, everyone, or all our not-for-profits and our charities. So it's a really good question. So I'm just going to whip you through, as I said, the components with the hope that you've actually had a bit of a chance to reflect. And certainly this is all, so there's, in the same way that you have the individual guide, there's the, where is it? Yeah, there's a building team resilience. Sticky note of it. There's a building team resilience coaching guide as well. So that sort of has got a lot in there. So as Karen said, that, you know, this is about, the robust is just about effectiveness. It's about shared purpose, meaning, goals, you know, all the stuff that we have to be an effective team. But the nuance is agility as well. So so we need to have the most important things that are at the core of team effectiveness there, but we also need to be adapting, and that's why I've called it solid intention with agility. So at one end, we might have a very bureaucratic organization, which is stuck in, the purpose and the goals and what we've always done. And at the other end, we've got the disruptors who are so agile. Sometimes they lose their core values and purpose and why they're there. And, we've seen that a lot with some of the IT companies who've lost their way. So this is getting that really nice sweet spot for the team around making sure that we're all there for the right reasons, but also adapting and shifting and being agile. And I think we saw early in COVID, a lot of people, not a lot, we saw some teams or some organizations throw the baby out with the bathwater because they were trying to be too agile, and then they were losing what they were really there to do, especially in some of the not-for-profits. Just yell if you, not yell, but just if anyone's got any questions, just reach out. Now we're getting into what are the elements that are shifts for teams. So when we were developing this, we were seeing more and more teams having to do more with less. So a resourceful team is very clever at using what they have, including their people, but also their budgets and their networks, and they're trying to evolve. They're trying to continuously, sharpen the sword. The opposite of this is silos, where my bit, your bit, my staff, your staff, and just continuing to try to do the same things even though they don't work. So that's the resourceful. So we've called that optimizing resources and processes. And of course, that was a really big one. I'll do one more and then I'll just pause and just see. Perseverance is you get knocked down, you get back up again, like the old Adelaide Rams rugby team. And again, COVID just made setbacks more regular and more part of life. And so if you're a team who's good at this, you share the energy and share the problem solving when things go wrong. And you have a bit of an attitude of, okay, what do we do next? What would it look like if we took the next step? Who do we need to call on? What did we do last time that worked? So there's a solution-focused language, but there's an energy that we're all in this together. And there's usually a process. So when things go wrong, they have a way of dealing with it, a process. And this is really important. It is not leader-led. And I think we see a lot of leaders doing all this. Come on, let's re-energize, let's regroup. That they're the motivator and they're the solution-focused person. But as they say, heroic leadership's dead. We have to replace it with collective leadership. So this is actually around how are we going to get through this? And let's start to generate options and ideas on this. And let's share the responsibility for that. So let me just take a pause for those three. So any of those resonate at the moment for a team, so anyone's in, so one of those that you can really see that's missing at the moment for a team you might be in or working with. Nobody. Linda.
Yeah, I don't think that we're brilliant at the resourceful piece sometimes. I feel like, yeah, I've seen some wasted resource actually internally, not being, it's a little bit, I'm not sure if it's a government thing but oh no, that's not their job, so they don't do that bit. I know, but they seem to have capacity and the ability. Perhaps we could be drawing on that. So I'm noticing a little bit of that where I am. So yeah.
Yeah, so you can sometimes use it as an excuse not to do something, the role description. Not my circus, not my monkey, or whatever the expression is. Yeah. Anyone else seeing it in any teams at the moment? Any one of those? Paul?
Yeah, the place I am today, actually, customer I'm working with, there's 18,000 people in this business and they work in technology. And there are shared service functions, group functions in the middle of the business that support all the other areas. I've got a team who's working in one of the business functions and they are super resourceful and they have been fed up of waiting to be served and to be helped. So It's created a challenge for me because I need them to align to the central service. But interestingly, they are a high-performing team. They're so resourceful. They've not waited for the business to get its act together and for people to give them budget or resource or direction. They've just got up and done it. And guess what? They're the highest performing team in the business.
Oh, great. That's a good news story. All right, thank you, Paul. So we'll just keep going, just a couple more, and then, as I say, we'll have a bit of a look at the report and break. And so the culture of self-care. So obviously this builds on the staying healthy, mastering stress on the raw individual, doesn't it? But the difference here is, are we having the conversations that support good stress management and overload and work-life balance? So it's actually around the culture that we create that gives each other the permission to actually engage in self-care. So this is a classic again in a lot of environments where there might be the protocols or the flexibility, but even though they're there, people don't feel they can take advantage of them because it's not the way you do things around here. Clearly, leaders have a huge impact on this. But I've had lots of conversations over the last few years around, what does self-care look like in this team? What are some of the ways we're going to hold that central? People sharing what works for them, because it's very individualistic, so that people can help that to happen. People sharing their signs of overload and how they want to be approached when they're in the overload, whether they want to be left alone or, whatever it is, and what work-life balance, which is a flexibility question, of course, what that looks like for people, what are the things that they want to make sure are held precious, like, once a week I leave on time and I make sure I get to yoga or the kids' football or whatever it might look like. So having these conversations allows us to start to put up some of those boundaries and agreements. And a classic one in professional services and in areas like health and social work is if we don't agree on those professional boundaries around what we're going to do and protection of our self-care, it becomes really, really hard to hold them up. So if we start thinking in teams where you have the team member who does everything for everyone and they're quite happy to work 24/7, and then you've got the people who've got out of work responsibilities and they want to keep reasonably to the hours, then what happens is the customers all go to the willing horse till they flog it, so it starts to then create disharmony around equity of workload. So there's lots of ways in which this can unravel, but ultimately it's about what's the culture we want to generate for us to try to look after each other as best we can. So it's quite different from individual. This one is a really important one that's become even more front of mind. I think it's the landscape's changing, right? So what we had beginning of the year might not be what we have now, might not be what we have, in a month's time. So teams need to be focusing far more on what is it that we are delivering, how do we know we're delivering on that, and what do we need to be doing to continue to build our capability. And that might be capability around sharing skills and knowledge, replacing staff when they leave with different skills and knowledge, or actually is also about building capacity through external networks. So, it's very unlikely that what the team is delivering on is going to be staying the same. So if they're not looking at how we're building this constantly, and the feedback on the team performance is really important, because I've met lots of teams where they do work and they have no idea whether that work's being useful, So I worked with one procurement team. I remember they generated all these reports that they thought were really important. No one ever looked at them, So again, how, they didn't even check in whether those things were useful because they weren't actually seeking that feedback. And then the last two, this one's fairly straightforward. It's all about belonging. So it connects a bit to the finding of purpose. But in our team, okay, are we supportive and cooperative? And do we have a sense of team? And that social glue as we've seen in the last couple of years, is really, really important, because the social glue means I'm loyal. I see you as my team. You know, we have a strong sense of team identity. We have mutual support. We look after each other. We have each other's back. We help each other out to get done what we need to do. So it's that emotional glue that's really important. And how it undoes is, I've got enough to do, I can't help you as well. Or I've finished my work, you know, I'm okay, you know, those sorts of attitudes around that. And support can be emotional support as well as, you know, task support, but really, really big one. And the last one is a bit harder to explain. And remember that these come out of factor analysis, so they're not always, you know, they don't always necessarily look, you know, clean as a concept. But this is like, I describe this as, so connected is the emotional glue. This is the motivational glue around, we're all in this together. We've got the same version of success. You know, it's not, you know, Kieran's version of success is him getting promotion. Mike's version of success is him getting promotion, you know, mine's, you know. So what gets in the way here is hidden agendas, pessimism. We're never going to be able to do this. So that real desire and motivation and optimism that we can do this. And the last one is really, really important in things like child protection, Lyndall, because in environments like yours where there's not a lot of good news, if you don't notice and celebrate success, then it really impacts on that shared motivation for success. You've always got to chunk down what success looks like. And that's become, in a lot of environments now where there's so much crap coming in that people feel they're not quite getting their head above the water. So noticing progress and redefining what progress is and celebrating it is really important. So those 7 components are 22 subdimensions. And as I mentioned, the only things they don't cover off, which are fundamental to good teamwork, is the structure of the team and the actual skills and abilities of the team. Okay, so I've recruited in, you know, Kieran, who's a psychologist, and I've recruited in, you know, Rachel, who's a coach, you know, whatever sort of, you know, we can certainly, the capability piece, you know, going back to, we can build our capability and we can share our strengths, but actually what we're coming to in terms of talent. So let me just stop sharing and ask if any of those last 3 resonated with an environment that you're working in at the moment. So the capability, the culture of self-care, the connected, the alignment, anything that you're seeing working really well or not so well in a team you're working in.
Can I just ask a question, Catherine? Sorry. The link between these components and psychological safety in a team, and also would you expect any significant differences in a hybrid team where people aren't so, you know, personally engaged? Sorry, probably off the track a bit.
Oh, no, it's not off the track at all. So I think that's a really good question. So I'm going to go back to the model to answer that, Kieran. So what we're actually seeing, so we talk about hybrid, the impact mostly there, well, there's a number of impacts. The first one is that sense of belonging, connectedness. Okay, we've got so much stuff now about social cohesion and belonging, haven't we? And how we still maintain some degree of social connection and belonging. So the connected one will definitely be. But of course, the resourceful one is also impacted, because when we're not actually seeing each other's workload and we're not actually having that visual of things, then that capacity to recognize that, you know, as someone mentioned earlier around that inequity, Paul, you know, where, you know, there's, you know, some people are really doing a lot and other people aren't, and that pooling of resources and that leveraging of strengths. So one of the issues, of course, with hybrid is, particularly for workers coming into an organization, they're not getting a chance to show their strengths and show what they're made of and the potential. And so being able to leverage that becomes more difficult. The other bit is the capability, because part of capability is also sharing our knowledge and skills. So you know, the stuff that we would have picked up in a workplace by informal mentoring, you know, or listening to other people manage a difficult scenario, you know, that's stuff that we pick up ad hoc way, as opposed to a structured mentoring professional development. That building of knowledge through just being present is also problematic. So you've actually got to build in more formally how we start to share some of those capabilities. So I think that's how hybrid has affected. There's also harder to have that energy. So the alignment, it's harder to have the optimism and energy as well about things. It's not quite the same. And then when we've got the hybrid versus the all virtual, which was your question anyway, is we've got that stuff around, there's a lot of stuff coming out at the moment around discrimination of the person who's excluded by accident. So, you know, they're missing out on a lot of stuff because they're remote. You know, they might be missing out not only in the social connection, but the opportunity of the new project or those sorts of things. So we're starting to get then a little bit of inequity, which can impact on the connected. So the short answer is almost everything is in some way affected. So you just have to be mindful of what does it look like for us to do this differently and still maintain these things. Yeah. Does that answer the question? And what was the other one? Oh, psychological safety. Psychological safety. All right. So psychological safety, but there's only one question which relates to trust. I think it's we trust each other to get the work done, which I think is in, which one would that be in? I think it's in capability, but there's not a direct question around psychological safety. And this is an interesting one, because when we use the model, the first thing we need to be doing is to establish psychological safety before we have the conversation. So why are we doing this? You know, how are your results going to be used? So it's actually for me about positioning, but certainly a lot of these elements connect, particularly the connecting, the care and support. You know, I have psychological safety if I think you're backing me up. Talking with a young woman today in a mainly male environment, there's been some unfortunate events happened, and she just felt that she just hadn't been supported, so she didn't feel safe. So a direct connection between support and psychological safety. I get a bit over all these new things that are suddenly.
Yeah, agreed.
Oh God! And so we've known. I mean, Mike, you've been in counselling forever. I mean, far out, you know, you've not been able to do any counselling without establishing psychological safety, have you? You know, I mean, would you agree?
Yeah, it's interesting. I've done a lot of reading of David Clark and Amy Edmonston, and there's a lot of books being sold, and I get it, but it's that culture that we can talk about the tough stuff here. And we're going to be hard on issue, but not on person, which is, of course, against human nature in some ways when ego comes into play. So, yeah, it's certainly evident that it's getting more airplay, maybe than 2 years ago.
Well, I think it's you get a TED talk, and then, I mean, I'm being cynical now, but there's so many now certifications you can get in psychological safety and programming. It becomes this whole industry. So the concept's great, but it becomes an industry, and then everyone's working on psychological safety. Well, you need psychological safety on its own. It's not, why bother? But it's actually around how is it an enabler to do the work you need to do. So in that situation, how is it an enabler to have the courageous conversations that you're talking about, rather than psychological safety on its own? So I really struggle with all this training on creating psychological safety, because I think for what end, you know? So how I would link it in this work is in the positioning of the work, in the discussion of the results. You know, you need to be crystal clear on what it is you're doing, how the results will be used, you know, having a little bit of conversation maybe at the beginning around what is our agreement in today in terms of how we want to work together on this. I mean, that's all you need to do. You don't need to spend 4 hours on let's create psychological safety and do a checklist. But that's my cynical view. So I think we see so much stuff reinvented with a name, and then there's suddenly an industry around it.
It's also
No.
we sometimes look at a group of people who work together are not always a team.
Yes, true.
You know, so as you were talking that through, I was thinking about a couple of groups that I work with and their networks of people who do similar work, but they're all doing work within their own teams, their own schools.
Yes.
They come together to share, but they're still not a team, they're a network.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
so some of those elements going down that track would be futile because, maybe 3 out of 20 might have a shared goal to do something together, but the other 17 haven't got any skin in the game.
I think that's such an important point, Mike, because why are we building a team when they're not actually a team in the beginning? So for me, this is only useful for people who have interdependent tasks. So they're delivering independent tasks to deliver on something. Otherwise, you're right, they're a group, they're a network, they're not actually a team. So trying to make a team out of something that's not there. Anyway, let's take a 5-minute break, and then we're going to come back. We're going to quickly go through the report, and then we'll do a little bit of a case study discussion, so that you can have a break from me. Okay. I'll quickly take you through the report. Sharon's put this in chat, and I think you've got it anyway in advance of the session, because this is a report we're going to do a bit of a discussion on, but I'm just going to orient you to the report because obviously it's different from the raw individual. It looks sort of the same here. On the front page, when you set up a team, and I'm not going to go through the instructions because there's no point because you'll forget, so when you're ready to do a team, make sure you read the instructions. But whatever you write the team name in is what's going to appear on the front here. So make sure you think about that because it appears there. Then there's all the bumpy stuff, all the intro, and then we get the results. All right, now, so section 2 is an overview. It's not really as useful an overview as the raw individual because there's 22 subdimensions. So once you start to look at ranges and averages, the ranges extend and the averages go to the middle. So I don't find that's a terribly useful. It's just a snapshot, but it's not terribly useful in terms of debriefing. But this is where the rubber hits the road. So for each of the 7 components, there are a number of subdimensions. So I mentioned there's 22. So robust, there's 5 subdimensions, and there's 2 to 3 questions in each of those subdimensions. So what we're looking at here is we've got the average score, but we've also got the lowest and highest score, the range, and we've got the mode, which is the most frequent score, and we've got the N, which is the number of people. So averages, as we know, are not always useful, but we can see number 1 is quite a high average because this is out of 6. It's 4.52, which is quite high, but we've got a range of 1 to 6. So we've actually got people in this team who are rating that really low. But the mode is 5, so we know that the people rating it low in a team of 10 might only be 1 or 2 people. So we've got 1 or 2 people who are not agreeing. So straight away, the range in itself is really interesting because it gives us an idea of the skewed responses in the team. So we've got that. And then the other thing that we've got here at the end, so they're all the 7 dimensions, is we've actually got comments to a number of questions. So how would you describe the current level of team resilience and why? These are fixed questions. What is the team currently doing that most contributes to its resilience? What could the team do differently to improve its resilience? And what else do you want the team to reflect on regarding its resilience? So we're going to talk about debriefing after you've had a little bit of a look at this as a case study. But straight away, when we're sort of looking at this report before we're starting to work with a team, is we're interested in the scores. and how they relate to some of the reflections and comments. It tells you quite a bit before you even go in. Now, the platform, which I'm also going to talk a little bit about today, is brilliant because you do all this in an app and it's really easy, and you can track progress and you can do all sorts of fancy things. But we're going to just start looking at the report, because what I want you to start to look at is the interactions or the associations between these scores and the comments. It's a really good way to start to look at those 22 subdimensions and how they might interact and how they might relate to what some of the things people are saying about the team. So, okay, has anyone not got that report in the chat or already? Because you're going to need that, because I'm going to put you in 3 groups. And the question is going to be, if you were working with this team and you've got this report, what would you be curious about exploring? So remember, we never go in with a prejudgment around this team need this and this team need that. We go in with a curiosity. But what would you be curious about? And I'll give you about 15 minutes. And it'll also give you a bit of a chance to get your head set around some of the numbers, because the averages and things are the same in the platform as well. So so hang on a minute, I don't want to do that. So share and not share, stop share. Okay, breakout rooms, let's do 3. Okay, so before I bid you farewell, is there anyone who's wants to ask anything or hasn't got the info? Next. Sharon and I are having a little nice catch-up social chat there. All right, so we've still got quite a bit to cover. So so I might just confine the discussion on that, or around any specific questions that came up, trying to work from, you know, sort of curiosity point of view on the report. Any questions or anything?
We were sort of wondering, do you give this report to the whole team beforehand, like, or do you present it to them at the session, or like is that what they get, the whole report?
Yeah, so beautiful. You're good at the segue, Nick, because that's what I'm going to talk about now, is what does the debrief look like? And I'm also going to then show you what it looks like in our new platform as well, which is different and better actually. But yeah, I'll show you what a debrief looks like and when you present the report back. So it's a really good segue. Any other questions on anything about it? It's pretty straightforward, yeah. Okay, cool. Right. So,
Catherine,
yeah.
just very quickly, I missed the wording that you said about page 5, the visual stuff. One of the questions that we talked about is the use of something more visual than the data. Yeah. To work with the team, and I'd be interested to understand your experience. My sense is if I put the data in this format in front of a team, I'd lose them into like trying to work out what all the numbers mean.
Yeah, I'll show you a little bit how that works in a sec, because okay. I've not found that, and I'll show you why in a sec. Okay. All right, so I'm going to take you through a debrief session. Now, exactly the same as, you know, when we've done this coaching session that you've just done for the individual. It's a starting point, okay? It's a starting point for a structure that just gets you going and gives you a bit of confidence. You don't have to use it. And as I go through it, I'll also talk a little bit about how this is different if we use the platform, because I also want to just give you a little bit of an introduction to the platform today as well, which is oriented around the raw team. So this formula is in the team coaching guide. It's about 3.5 hours to do it properly. You can do it in 3 hours. I've also done it with like a whole department of like, you know, 4 teams, because there are bits that you can do together and there are bits that you can actually do break off where they do their own specific teamwork. So it's quite flexible. Yeah, so let's get going. So this is just the formula. So the first thing that I've already mentioned is that it's really important well, for me anyway, when we're talking about team resilience, it's actually around the context they're in. So what's the problem they're trying to solve with resilience? What's the challenge they want a healthier relationship with? It's very much around what they need to do, depends on what's going on. So in a traditional team session, the first thing I'll get the team to do before we even talk about the report, even talk about the model, is to maybe in small groups, is to come up with what are the challenges that the team has right now and into the next 3-4 months, so brainstorming those, if you like, coming up a list of those. But then what I'm wanting them to do is to condense them to the top 3 challenges. So I've done enough team development days and away days with 10-ton of butcher's paper, and particularly when you start to talk about challenges in today's environment, you can spend all day just on what the problems are. So we're trying to condense to the top 3. So I might get them to generate in their group the challenges they're experiencing and condense to the top 3. And then I might take the top 3 from each table. This is in a face-to-face, obviously, and try to come up with top 3 that they're going to work on for the afternoon. In the platform, it's really fantastic because people anonymously put the challenges in that they have at the moment, the most important challenge for them, and then they anonymously vote. So the technology immediately gets us the top challenge, and I'll show you that later on. If I've got time, the next thing I'll actually do is I'll actually get them to do a little bit of visioning around, so doing one challenge at a time, a little bit of visioning of what would it look like if the team was better managing those challenges. So the reason I do that is to get them into possibility mode and get them into what is it the team itself can be doing rather than the system or the organization. Particularly with executive teams, it's really hard to separate the work the team needs to do for the strategy. So sometimes I do a little bit of visioning, but I don't have time. And then what I do is, and this goes to what Nick asked, is I introduce the raw team model. So in the same way that we show the visual that we just went through today, is I actually take them through each component, but I align it with the challenges that they've already mentioned. So for example, if I'm talking about resourceful, I'm saying, well, one of the challenges that we've already spoken about today is your 4 staff down having to do the same amount of work. So resourcefulness. So I'm actually connecting it back to the discussion in the same way that when I'm working on a raw individual workshop, I'm bringing it to life in their context. So we haven't even got to the report yet. Then I will, and again, I'm talking face-to-face, but you can do this virtually, obviously. Only then do I show the report, and I get them in small groups to just spend about 10 minutes looking at what surprises them and what confirms what they thought would come out of it. So it's just a real light touch. So I'm obviously explaining, how to read the report, which is about 5 minutes, just as I did with you just then. But then they're actually starting to look at it. And then we've got the question that you asked, Rachel, is okay, well, is that too much data? Well, what we do then is we take the challenge that they want to work on first, and in the app, this is voted on, so it's really easy, is we start to say, okay, for that challenge, looking at all the elements in the report, which areas are we really strong on that are important? So what we're not doing, Rachel, is we're not looking at every single little bit of data and trying to analyze all that. We're actually saying, right, at the moment, we've got this real issue with feeling disconnected because we're working in a hybrid environment. And so the connected scores will probably be the most important, and we're looking at what's good and what's not good. The other thing I often do here is I will get them to look at the report, and I will get them to use the cards. So, so we've got these team coaching cards. I'll get them to use the report to lay out the cards. And I've done this in hybrid where I've had people on the screen and I've had people in the room. lay the cards out from those that are strengths according to the report through to those that are development needs. And I find the teams are really able to do this really quickly. And what they do, which is really good, is they argue about whether or not something's high or low. So someone might say, well, that's high because it's got a really high average. And someone else will say, well, it can't be high because we've actually got someone who's rated at 1 because the range is 1 to 6. So they have this really nice debate. But it's amazing how quickly they can lay the cards out on a continuum. And I did this with oncology doctors, and they had the self-care card out of the room. It was so low. And they were doing it in a hybrid, you know, with people in Melbourne. So when we were in Bendigo. So the cards are really good because then I say for this challenge, which cards are on the strength side that you want to work on and which cards are on the development side. And so we've got all these lovely coaching questions that they ask each other. In the platform, the coaches are the coaching cards are all built in. So you can see your results. It's not a report, you just get your data, you look at your assessment results, and you can immediately link to the cards to have a conversation. So to answer the question again, Rachel, I find that because you're not getting them to analyze all the data and all the scores, and you're just saying for this challenge, which are the important ones, or if you're deciding to use the cards to lay them out, and you can lay them out on DeckHive as well. You know, we did a session the other day on using the cards hybridly in DeckHive as well, which I can talk about another time. I don't find people are overwhelmed by it. And what I didn't want to do is to have a 20-page report with 10 different ways of cutting the data. You know how you have those reports, it's the same stuff, but different graphs.
Yep.
So it's really, we're just saying, okay, you know, for this particular challenge, which is doing more with less.
Yeah.
To the elements that are what we need to talk about and which are high and low that are related. And let's just focus on those. Let's not try and do everything. So it'd be nice to have a couple more graphs, but I don't find it a problem.
It also ensures that the onus is on the team to understand and interpret their own data, which I actually quite like.
Correct.
It's not spoon feeding them with,
correct,
look at this.
Yeah.
It
and
tells
I think
you what the answer is.
We are never with teams preempting what they need. We're meeting them where they are and what they think they need. So, I mean, it's really easy, especially when we've got the report in advance or even on the platform, we can see in advance how people rated themselves on the assessment. It's really easy to go with a preconceived plan of they need this. But they determine what they need. And all this does is provides a framework of things that are really important to invest in, but it enables them to decide for their pain point right now, where are they going to best invest their energy? So it's chunking it down, it's making it strategic, it's making it manageable. And it means they haven't got 10 million bits of butcher paper on how they'd be high performing on all these elements, which is totally outside of scope and energy these days. So it's really about right now, what's the burning issue? What can we leverage? What can we develop? How do we chunk that down to really manageable actions to actually track in the right direction rather than the wrong direction? And so we're identifying strengths to leverage, we're identifying areas to develop. And in a workshop, I never go beyond about 10 actions. And within the platform, we're just talking about a couple of actions that we're going to do for the next month. So it's chunk it down within scope of influence, relevant to context, team-led and managed, with the model simply providing them a snapshot in time of where they are. That's all it is. It's not, I think if you overcomplicate, you're in trouble. You overdiagnose, you're in trouble. It's meeting the team where they are right now with what's front of mind for them. And trusting they know. So traditionally, I mean, I've done 5 million team effectiveness, benchmarking things. Traditionally, we would try to be getting everyone above the benchmark to be a high performing team. Well, forget it. There ain't such thing, because we could be high performing today and tomorrow we might not be, because the circumstances have changed and we've lost a couple of people and we've got new customers and we've got a new business model and we've got a new CEO and we've, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So in a fluid, fast moving environment, high performance is rare and it's not lasting unless you continue to invest. I don't know. What do you think, Kieran? You know all about high performance teams. What do you reckon?
I'm just interested, Catherine, when you said there are a maximum of 10 actions, and I'm just sort of thinking, in line with what Mike and I discussed around the 1%, I'd probably be more inclined to say, what are the 3 actions that we could do that are going to get the most leverage?
Yep.
From a team perspective, especially executive teams, I think 3 seems to be, workable.
I love your work. I mean, I particularly in the platform, we're talking about 1 or 2. So I love your work because I think that's where it needs to be. And I think I probably get pulled into the, you feel as a consultant that you've got to add value by at least having a reasonable number of outcomes. But at the end of the day, if it's 10, you're still saying where you're going to start, which,
sure. What are the top 3?
No, I'm with you on that. Yeah. So let me show you what that looks like. Sorry, Caroline, you saying something? You were just on mute. Were you saying something?
No, sorry, I was telling my daughter to turn her iPad down. Sorry.
Love it. Okay. Anyone want to ask anything?
You need to unmute next time you do that, Caroline, so we can all hear.
So we can all hear it.
I'll be talking the whole time then.
Sharon's got an uncontrollable dog this evening. I usually got an uncontrollable husband, but I pre-cooked dinner and I hope he's eating it. Poor guy's had a bit of a bashing tonight. It's the second time I mentioned him. Okay, back on track. Okay, so all right, so it's a debrief process, but let me just show you. So what we've tried to do is we have developed a new app in a dashboard that uses tech to scale and fast track this. And some of you on the line have already had an opportunity for me to take you through this. So we are inviting anyone who wants to have a deeper dive to have a one-on-one demonstration of this, because we're just not going to be able to do it justice in this session. And we're also looking at some more in-depth training on how to position it and, and how to onboard teams and so on. But let me just show you what the platform does in terms of, it's a platform, it's a framework that enables teams to strategically work on their team development and develop a coaching culture. And it enables continuation of the journey of resilience, so how sometimes we go in and we do a consulting piece, so Kieran, you might go in and you might work with the executive team and you might do a review session and then they're off because they can't afford you anymore, and and they're off on their own journey. This enables them to continue the journey. It also enables scaling. So one of the things I've always been conscious of is that the senior teams get all the interest and all the attention and all the money, and so Mike works in schools, for example, the teachers are not getting so it's about democracy in a way of how do we make sure everyone gets access to be able to be the best they can be in the system. So it's about scaling. So the biggest difference, and if you're what we can do is we can do a one-on-one and we can really show you how you can do this whole process within the team platform itself. But the biggest difference is we get amazing analytics when we do it through technology. So we're able, so if we're a team, you know, every time you go into the platform, you rate your well-being and engagement. So there's a constant pulse check. So at any one stage, we can determine the well-being, the engagement in our team, and we can see whether that's tracking up and down. We have a record of the challenges we've been working on, you know, so I just showed you the traditional feedback where we brainstorm the challenges, we condense them to 3, we decide which one we're going to work on. The technology enables everyone to put a challenge in anonymously, we vote on it. So before we even get to the meeting, we've already decided what our pain point is that we're going to be working on today. And we've already done the assessment in the platform, and it takes 5 minutes. So before we even go into the meeting, we know how we're tracking, we know our challenge, and we're able to do that, what's good and what's not good. And the other thing that we haven't got before that the platform's offering is, so if you've got multiple teams, so Lyndall in child protection, and I know I've shown you and Bob and the guys the platform already, but if you've got multiple teams within a department or the enterprise itself, we actually can have an organizational dashboard where we're not only looking at the pulse checks of resilience and wellbeing engagement, but we can actually see the trending challenges that teams are working on, and importantly, the solutions that they're bringing to that. So we can start to share across the organization these solutions, but we can also, as an executive, see what problems are that teams are working on. It's a bit like a flip of an engagement survey, where the engagement survey gives you the numbers, but then you've got to go away and find out why those numbers are what they are. Here we've already got the teams working on the stuff, and the numbers come out of that, so the pulse check comes out of that. Ultimately, this will also give us industry benchmarking. So the platform is designed because people were saying, how do we continue the work once they can't afford us anymore as consultants, or internally, how do we make sure that as an OD person, you know, so for example, Lyndall working internally, how do we actually manage to scale and deliver this across an organization when there's only 2 of us in OD, you know, so it enables you to scale. And for you, Mike, as well, you know, how do we scale so that we're just involved in the pieces that need our attention and teams are largely self-managing. So it was about a scaling, it was about continuing the journey, it was about how do we use technology to do this even better, and how do we actually also produce some really meaningful data that's actually going to inform our interventions. So that's what the platform's all about. And as I said, you know, really happy to do a one-on-one to show you inside it and explain it a little bit more, and just, you know, keep an eye on some training that's going to be coming out specifically on that. So let me just stop sharing the moment. So, so questions on anything from today in terms of the platform, the report, the team, that anything that comes to mind?
Yeah. Would you be able to tell us what the team was like that we were looking at?
It's a made up team, that one was.
Oh, that wasn't a real one?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. What came out of it in your discussion that you ended up being curious about?
There were quite a few things. Is it Lyndall? Lyndall was better at running the group.
Delegate. Okay, Lyndall, you've been delegated. I'm sorry.
No, that's all right. I think we thought that it looked like they were all having a good time, and they were all connected, and they were aligned in the sort of the warm fuzzies. They were like that. They seemed to be like a really kind of, that there was like a collegiate feel amongst the team. But it did, where a bit of disparity seemed to come in was around the resourcing and distribution of work. And we question whether, is there perhaps a couple of people feeling like they're doing a little bit more of the lion's share and maybe not wanting to speak up because they're all friends and everyone's getting on really well and they don't want to rock the boat too much, but is there a little bit of a misalignment in how the resource is being distributed? That was something that kind of that we questioned and thought perhaps that could have been an issue.
Yeah, the other thing we wove into that sample, and I worked with this, so we designed it in collaboration with my Canadian colleagues, Catherine and Mary, is we wanted to also weave into it the fact that sometimes teams can be very cohesive and caring and, you know, have that perceived good teamwork, but they're not externally focused or forward focused. So it's what they call having an outside in focus. You know, we can't be closeted and think that good teamwork is everyone getting on really well and being supportive, because they were, you know, the way we wrote the case study is they were out of touch with what was happening in the external environment and didn't have that external radar that they needed to respond to. And so in coaching, they talk about forward, back, outside in. So that's jargony. It basically means that we need to be looking to the horizon and being proactive, which links with our definition. But we also need to be looking at how we serving the system, which is the external focus. So quite often you'll go in and people will describe themselves as a great team, but they're essentially a great social club sometimes. Because they're actually, and that goes to the capability component, because they're not actually in touch with what is it they need to be developed to stay relevant as a team, relevant as an organization, so their capability. So you're nodding there, Emily. If you're nodding, it's going on. So a good team knows who and what it has to serve and is aligning with that, and also has an eye to what is happening outside in the environment that we need to be preparing for, rather than everything being done to us and we adapting to what people are asking us to adapt to. So very proactive, which is why the team resilience is about managing pressure healthily, adapting, but eye to the horizon. So it's a very much thinking about the team and the system. That's a very long answer, but yeah. So it was a made-up team, that particular one. But that would be certainly a lot of teams. Social workers, Nick, you know, so without, and this is also, who else is this? Tamara as well. You can because I've worked in a lot of social work teams, they quickly go to self-care and what we need to do to look after ourselves. And I'm not discounting that, but they need to be looking outside as well. Yeah. Is that a unfair judgment? Lyndall, you work with social workers as well in child protection, but yeah, so there are nurses too. They tend to go to the self-care piece, but it's only one small piece that creates resilience, because it's also about relevance, it's about sustainability, it's about you know, how do we still exist, you know, the business. Yeah. Thank you.
I've got a team that I'm just about to start working with. I think I contacted you about how to manage team versus individual, but it's a teaching team in a primary school. And again, the focus is we need to look after ourselves, and actually they're struggling to deliver because of the wider context. Well, the UK education system is a bit screwed at the moment anyway, but in terms of resource and the group that they are a wider part of, they've just kind of gone to ground and said, oh, let's look after ourselves. So yeah, it's going to be important to explore how we help them to deliver at the same time as that.
And it's a natural behavior, isn't it? We go into self-survival and we go internally focused. At the very time we need to be connecting and collaborating and networking. So it's a natural behavior. We've actually got work happening in Education Scotland, Rachel, with the platform. We have to connect with Leslie Garrick, who's leading that. Yeah, so some great work happening in schools, and also here in Queensland with Fleur Johnston, who Mike knows, working in schools, People Bench. So yeah, some good stuff happening.
Are you able to put me in touch with the Education Scotland?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, with Leslie.
That would be really useful.
Yeah, have a chat with her and how she's going with that. That's really good. All right, homework. So I sound like a teacher now. So it would be useful. Again, next session, which is only the day after tomorrow, we're going to be focusing on leadership. So we won't, even though the model's the same, we won't be returning to the team per se. So my suggestion to embed the learning from today, because I recognize it's a lot of stuff, is to have a bit of a look at the raw team guide, which, as I mentioned, is the sort of a similar version to the raw individual guide. So we've got a coaching guide for individual, team and leader. And then there is actually a video that I did, which is actually just a Zoom with slides. If you're wanting to revisit the debrief, it's a little video I did on how to debrief a team, which just takes you through that formula, but a little tiny bit more detail. And of course, those things, you know, are really useful when you come to use stuff to do some revision. So it's just really embedding the learning. So next time, what will we be doing? We'll be looking at the raw leader. We'll be looking at, there's two versions of that. We're going to be looking at the two versions. We're going to have a little bit of a play with the raw leader coaching cards again. So that'll be good. And then we're going to talk about how do we bring all the elements together for an organizational intervention. You know, so I know Rachel was saying, you know, what do we do first, the individual or the team? You know, there's all these questions around how it all comes together. And then just a little bit around some of the marketing resources, because some people here are obviously external. So what's available to help you with the promotion of various things. Yeah, so plenty to cover still on Thursday. So if you can at least read some of that stuff and feel like you're well enough on top of that to move to the next one, that would be really useful. Right. Oh, so we are 1 minute to go. One last question from anyone we can take. Otherwise, we will go off and have our dinner and leave Rachel and Paul to have a nice day ahead. A good Tuesday. All good? All right. I'll see you Thursday. Okay, bye.
Thank you.